What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Caps Hockey Review. Back with you again, finally. It's been a couple weeks. Extended Christmas break for the NHL. Extended Christmas break for our Capitals. They had, I believe, 3 games in total get postponed, possibly 4 in that stretch. So we're going to see some games made up here coming up, I believe, kind of what would have been that Olympic break. They're filling those with makeup games like I've discussed. I am not discussing the Olympics in this edition. I am staying away from COVID as much as possible because, quite frankly, I'm tired of talking about it. So, for the Caps, you get back to a little bit of normal for these games. I mean, you get Kuznetsov, Backstrom, Oshie, Dowd all activated from COVID protocol finally. You're not running, there was a couple games we saw the center depth. I mean, Eller's number 1, and then you've got, 3 guys that, you got like Scarbosa, Protas, Leeson, playing center on those bottom 3, McMichael in there. It doesn't look, on paper, it looks tough, but they did a great job. In all fairness to them, they did a fantastic job. They answered the bell as well as they possibly could have. So getting to Nashville. Nashville paid a visit to Capital One Arena on Wednesday night. For the Caps, great start. Fantastic start. John Carlson, I think, is going to be the big mention of this game. He got off to a bit of a slow start this season, but he has heated up so much in these last couple months. I mean, 4 points in this game, goal, 3 assists. Nick Backstrom is starting to find his form. Evgeny Kuznetsov scored just a really wicked goal to break the tie. This was almost a completely different story in a hockey game. Caps, like I said, get out to that 3-0 lead in the first period. You come out in the second. What do? You give your lead away. 3 goals by the Preds in the second period. That's the last thing, obviously, that you want. Especially, I mean, you've kind of fallen victim to these quick strike goals. I mean, against Chicago, probably most notoriously, that game against Florida where they fell apart in the third period. I said after that Florida game, this is something I am looking to be eradicated very quickly. This can't hang around. This can't keep happening to this team. Well, it happened against Chicago, and it happens here. The difference, the Caps did not fold the tent, and I think I said after Chicago, they didn't fold the tent. They kept battling, but this time around, they found a way to win a hockey game. You score those 3 goals pretty quickly in that third period for the Preds. Peter Laviolette uses his timeout and just to kind of reset everybody. They're running around like crazy, almost chickens with the head cut off. So for the Caps, this has to clean up. Defensively, they're missing some guys, of course. You've got some young guys in the fold. Alexeyev, most notably. You're missing still some prominent pieces on your back end. It's going to be tough. I mean, you're going to have to ask your goalie to maybe bail you out of some situations that you otherwise wouldn't with a full, healthy defensive core. So, with all that in mind, this cannot happen. Still, even with all that, this can't happen. You have to find a way to stop the bleeding. And they did after that third one, thank goodness, and good on them. But we're starting to see this too often. They're giving up leads. They're falling victim to these quick strike sequences where they're giving up 2 or 3 goals in a matter of a couple minutes. So, or even less than a minute in some cases. So that needs to stop. That's gonna kind of be my big thing moving forward. What I'm looking for to clean up for the Caps, it's that you have to be able to reset the computer after you give up a goal and just get right back on track. You can't sit there and watch the game. You can't sit there and wonder what happened, because when you do that, you go from giving up 1 goal to giving up 3 very quickly. So, Samsonov kind of falling victim here. I wouldn't really put any of these goals on him. I have a tendency to not blame goalies. I get it. I'm sorry if you think differently, but I have a tendency to give goalies the benefit of the doubt in most cases, and certainly in this one, I would give him the benefit of the doubt. But for the Caps, you get out of that second period, right? I mean, okay, you go to the third period tied at 3. It's, brand new hockey game, 20 minutes to go. Let's find a winner. And the Caps were that winner. Now, Evgeny Kuznetsov has had a ton of time shorthanded this season. More, and this is something he asked for. I mean, he went to Peter Laviolette last season and said, and much to his credit, because I think if he hadn't done this, we would have seen him traded. He went to Laviolette and said, I don't feel like I'm contributing enough. I want more ice time. I want more ice time in key situations, in tough situations, in our zone, in, killing penalties. Kuznetsov is not a defense first kind of guy. I mean, he's just not, and we don't expect him to be. That's not what we need him to be. But he's finding ways, killing penalties. He's creating offense. I mean, his creativity and his raw speed, his hands, and just his skill with the puck make him a danger, no matter how, what the difference in players is on the ice. So I think it's a great move by Laviolette to give him that freedom a little bit. Now, sure, I mean, Carl Hagelin, Nick Dowd, Lars Eller, Tom Wilson, those are still going to be your primary guys, but you got, 20 seconds left on a penalty kill. I'd put Kuz out there. Definitely. Because, I mean, if nothing else, okay, he's going to be responsible with the puck in his own end and do what he needs to do. But with an expiring penalty, I mean, he can make that long stretch pass to the guy coming out of the box. So I really like this for the Caps. And hats off to Laviolette for doing it, having trust and having faith in Evgeny Kuznetsov. And it paid off here. Just that wicked wrister. I mean, he came out from behind the net. It's just a dead angle. He had about the size of about 2 pucks to fit that thing over Saros' shoulder, and he fit it in there. So it was great shot, great goal for Kuznetsov. And the Caps get out of there. I mean, 5-3 final. It's, it's not pretty, but we'll take it. I mean, an ugly win. I would take an ugly win over a pretty loss any day of the week. So, for the Caps, you head to Detroit. This is, I've talked about them a ton, it seems like, so far early this season. Detroit is, a very young, very talented team, very much on the rise, and could create some pressure for some of those Atlantic teams in the playoff push. They could find themselves in the middle of that playoff push if they kind of stay on the right track here. So, getting to Detroit, you need to bounce back. I mean, Lucas Johansen makes his NHL debut. I will talk a little bit more about Alexeyev and Johansen kind of individually or as a pair once we get through Detroit, because obviously these are two of the probably your 2 top prospects at this point. I mean, Faravari, I think, has graduated from prospect to regular roster player. I don't think we're going to see him go anywhere, and for good reason. He's been fantastic. So, in terms of taking Faravari out of that prospect discussion and what we've got left for guys who haven't made that jump to the NHL, I think these 2 are it, defensively. These are your 2 big pieces that, for the Caps, you really need to pan out. So, getting to Detroit. Road game. That first period was tough. I mean, they were outshot by a wide margin, but and you give up the first goal. We haven't seen them do that a whole lot this season. They've been really good about getting that first goal, getting off to a really good start. So what, like I've talked about this so much this season, it just changes the game for you. And when you give up the first goal as opposed to scoring the first goal. Scoring the first goal, you're off to a good start. You're attacking the game. You're playing, you're playing on your toes. Giving up the first goal, you kind of have to reset a little bit and, kind of figure out some things. So giving up the first goal is tough. I mean, Thomas Greiss, the Caps have played against, I believe, both times previously against Detroit. He's been fantastic in the net for Detroit. Him and Alex Nedeljkovic have been a great tandem for this team. But the Caps, you got your own guy, Samsonov is making his moment count. He's been great lately. That Nashville game was kind of tough for him, but a great bounce back game here for Sammy. And I'll discuss him a little bit more after as well. I have a couple things I'd like to discuss with our buddy Sammy. So, finishing out in Detroit, I'm going to keep it a little bit short here. If anybody's looking for in-depth analysis on this thing, I apologize. So, but I'll hit the big points. The Caps, you get the game tied. I mean, Evgeny Kuznetsov, goals in consecutive games now, and assisted on the Ovechkin goal as well. So 3 points. He's heating up again, hopefully. And great goal. I mean, great job by him to pull that pass, kind of pull it out of his skates, and, great shot for him. So getting the game tied is huge before you get to the third period. It just, it's kind of like scoring the first goal in the game. It just changes your mentality. Going into the third period tied is a lot different than going into the third period down a goal. It kind of changes how you're going to go about the game and how you're going to play the game. So for the Caps, I mean, power play opportunities, I'll have to discuss the power play a little bit as well. Power play opportunities kind of go missed, but they get a late one. They do get a late opportunity. Alex Ovechkin cashes in. Now, as you can see by the ticker, we're sticking with it. Alex Ovechkin is now the all-time leader in NHL history in power play goals with 275 out of 700, and I don't know the exact number. I apologize at this point. Over 750 goals. Everybody who says, oh, he only does this damage on the power play, that's almost 500 goals coming at even strength. So, or shorthanded. He doesn't have a lot of shorties, but he does have a few. So, I don't think he has too many naysayers anymore unless your name's John Scott. But getting past that, congrats to Ovi. He had to pass one more milestone before we got out of 2021 and into the new year. So, great job by him. Congrats to Ovi. The milestones just keep adding up. Finally, to end the game, he would tack on an empty netter, his 24th of the season. Keeps doing it. The Caps need him to be the man, and he keeps doing it. And I apologize. I do not believe we have seen Tom Wilson. He is back from injury. I had a little bit of a brain lapse there. Yes. Anyway, back on track. Also, I missed this in the Nashville game. Michael Kempny gets his first NHL point in over 2 years. His first NHL game in over 2 years, just due to all the injuries, roster, they're Laviolette and the time he's been with the Caps. I mean, because Farivari missed a lot of the year, or I'm going to ramble a little bit here. He got hurt going into the playoffs the year after they won the Cup. He tears the hamstring. Just comes back from that kind of midway through the next season, gets hurt again. So that whole, I believe it would be 1920 was basically a wash. We didn't really see him, almost 2 years since he's played an NHL game is what I'm getting at here. Gets his first point in over 2 years. That's huge. I mean, he was a big part of what they did winning the Stanley Cup. He was that, they didn't make a big splash at, the trade deadline like they had in years past. They just went out, got this guy from Chicago who everybody was, he's solid, but it's like, everybody's kind of like, this is interesting. Like, why, do they really think Kempney's going to make the difference? Well, he did make a difference. They won a Stanley Cup. Anyway, great for Kempney, finally getting back to the big club. He's spent a lot of time with Hershey, rehabbing. He had some injury problems last year as well, unfortunately. Great for him, getting back to the NHL, getting kind of, back on track, hopefully. I don't know how much we'll see him the rest of the year, but The NHL has reintroduced taxi squads, so we will probably see him skate with the team a lot. If he's not playing, I would expect to see him play, though, just with all the rotation the Caps have had. I'm sure this is not the last we've seen of Michael Kempny this season. Finally, one more mention I have to make. Carl Hagelin scores his second goal of the season against Nashville. Carl Hagelin is the ultimate team guy, I think. He does all these important things, and I've talked about him before. He does all these great things that don't get, probably the credit they deserve. The blocking shots, the killing penalties, the playing those grind minutes. I mean, that, playing on that line with Nick Dowd and Garnet Hathaway, these guys might be the best fourth line in the NHL. So just shout out to Carl Hagelin. He's been, so great. And that whole fourth line, I mean, Dowd has found ways to contribute offensively. Hathaway has. Hagelin's had a couple points in these last two games, so these guys are starting to heat up a little bit. I mean, anytime your fourth line can really contribute offensively as well, it's a recipe for a dangerous team. So great for them. I'd love to see this continue moving forward. Hopefully it will. Hopefully we'll see some roster stability. I still have to talk about it because we still haven't seen it. Finally, getting to our defensive prospects. Lucas Johansen was, if I called him Ryan anywhere earlier in the video, I apologize. He is Ryan Johansen's younger brother. I told you I was going to be a little bit jumbled today. I apologize. Lucas Johansen, prized defensive prospect. He was a first-round pick in 2016, and this game in Detroit was his first in the NHL. His very first NHL game. So why is that? I mean, I've talked about it at length, and we had Alexeyev as well. 2018 first-round pick, made his NHL debut on Wednesday against the Predators. Why is that? Why do we have these young guys just now making their NHL debuts? I mean, Johansen's been, it's been 5 years since he was drafted, almost 6. So why? I mean, that's a question I've seen a lot. Just kind of, perusing through social media. Why haven't we seen more of these guys? Well, to start, both of these guys, after being drafted, went back to their junior teams. I believe Johansen was a member of the Kelowna Rockets in the WHL. He went back to junior. Alexeyev played for the Red Deer Rebels, also in the WHL. He went back to juniors for a year before they signed their AHL deals or their NHL contracts and went to Hershey. So that's a part of it, but injuries for Johansen. He has not played really a full season since his first year in Hershey. I mean, this year has been the most games he's played in the previous 3. We saw, obviously last year the AHL didn't complete their season with COVID. He only played about 5 games. The year before he only played about 9. He missed, a lot of time due to injury. And even the one before that, this is, I believe, his 4th or 5th year. It would be his 5th with the Bears. His first year he played 76 games. Then he played 45. Then 5. Then 9. And now he's up to 22 this year. So for Johansen, he hasn't played much. I mean, when you look at the number of games played by Lucas Johansen and compare them to the number of games played by Alexeyev, who was drafted 2 years after and, basically has 2 years less in the AHL, they've played about the same amount of games. Okay. That's one reason. They, these two, obviously these last 2 seasons, the Caps haven't really had a chance to get a good look at these guys because there hasn't been too many opportunities. So, there's that. Secondly, I've talked about it before, the Caps have not always been the best at getting their young guys into the fold. I mean, and in fairness to this Caps organization, we see young guys really get their chance, unless you're a real prized prospect and you're, a top 10 pick, it takes some time for you to get your shot unless you're going to a rebuilding team. And usually if you're going to a rebuild, you're in the top 10 being picked. So outside of that, if you're a young guy, you almost have to wait until a team is ready to rebuild because you are what they're going to try to build around. So we haven't seen that from the Caps, obviously. We've seen a couple retools. I mean, obviously after that 13-14 season, GM, coach, everybody gets fired. New staff, new GM comes in. They don't, young guys don't really get a chance. They kind of did a retool. They picked up some veteran pieces, and that's what they've done since. We've seen some young guys get chances in the past. Verana, Burakovsky, but those two really struggled to kind of get in. It took them a lot of time. They didn't really get a real good shot to play top 6 forward minutes, until they're, 4 or 5 years into their NHL careers. So the Caps are not always the best. And I'm kicking around the idea that they might be the worst team at getting young guys involved. This year, to make my point very long-winded there, this year, they've had no choice. We've talked about it a ton. COVID, injuries, everything has made this impossible to ice a full NHL roster. We've seen, obviously, Connor McMichael made the team out of camp, get a shot, and he's stuck. We've seen Protas, due to injury and illness, get his shot, and he has made every bit of it. They're being forced to give these young guys a chance now. So, and to, maybe take some of this off the Caps. Okay. Johansen has never been a high point producer. He wasn't in junior, and if you look at his production, it has stayed pretty steady in his time in the AHL. When you compare, points scored in the number of games played, it's roughly the same. He's usually clicking about, if you want to, do math, I'd say he's clicking at about a third of a point per game. So basically a point every 3 games. That's where he was in junior, and that is where he's been as a pro. So he hasn't regressed from his junior days to his pro days. And I think a lot of this is just the Caps have better options, or, more experienced options. I wouldn't even necessarily say better options, just more experience. It's the old thing that I think everybody experiences at some point or another in their lives. You need experience for this job, but you can't get experience without experience. You know what I mean? So you need experience to get experience. So they're kind of hitting a wall a little bit. And same with Alexiev. I mean, he was pretty highly touted coming out of Russia. Obviously a member of the Red Deer Rebels, pretty respected junior program. Well, they've had their issues these past few years, but anyway, moving past that, I'm not getting into it. Alexiev, I talked about him a lot in the summer, expecting him to get some time this year. And hoping to see it because, again, this Caps team is aging. You need to see these young guys start to get their chances and start to make the most of these opportunities. So my early impressions of Alexeyev and Johansen, pretty solid. They look like young guys. They look like guys who haven't really had their opportunities yet. Johansen's 24, Alexiev's 22. They're still relatively young, but you would like to see them start to get into the fold a little bit more. So, to put a bow on this whole prospect discussion, what does this mean? We're seeing these guys get their chances. Do I think they're going to stick? No. I think they're either going to be taxi squad or they're going to be, I think the best thing for them would to be in the AHL, where they're going to play games and where they're going to mature a little bit more. But there also comes a point where playing in the AHL isn't going to do anything more for your development. There comes a point where you hit a wall, and the only way to get better and to improve is to play against better players in the NHL. So are we hitting that wall with these two? I think we're getting close. And, for Johansen, he signed a 1-year contract in the summer. I think this is the Caps saying, okay, if you're going to to make your jump and you're going to be, a part of this NHL team, this is your chance. So Alexiev, still a little bit more time, I think. But the concerning thing for me, and like I said, to put a bow on all this, Martin Fehervary has been, kind of in and out of the lineup the last couple of years, and this year he's finally, made the most of his opportunity and gotten a real good opportunity and ran with it. I mean, playing with John Carlson is huge. So he was drafted 2018 second round. He was drafted after Johansen, of course, and he was drafted in the same draft as Alexiev about 15 picks later. So that's a little bit concerning. I mean, you're seeing a guy, certainly from the Johansen front, it's concerning because you've seen a guy that's drafted 2 years later. He's obviously, we said Johansen's had some injury issues and hasn't played as much, but anytime you're seeing a guy drafted, a couple of years after you that's making the jump and you haven't yet, that's concerning. And it's concerning from a cap standpoint too, because it's like, okay, did we miss on this first round pick? I mean, first round picks are important. These are, the best available talent to you. So you need to hit on these picks. And obviously there's maybe some concern that Johansen might be a bust, might, maybe not live up to the hype. Who knows yet? I mean, he had an assist in his NHL debut. That's something. That's a start. So hopefully he'll get the opportunity to expand on this, to grow, and to, hopefully get a few more chances at the NHL level this season. Okay. Putting prospect talk behind us, because it's a long-winded discussion and I don't want to have it because it gets a little bit boring. Finally, to wrap the show, we're going to talk about Ilia Samsonov. I said at the beginning of this season, I have not always been the biggest Samsonov fan. I was excited when they drafted him. I was excited when he finally came to North America. But he struggled early. I mean, backing up Holtby, he played pretty well. He was put in a pretty good spot. I mean, Holtby having won a Stanley Cup, having, tied for the record for wins in a season, winning a Vezina trophy, winning a Jennings trophy with Philip Grubauer. What a great mentor. And I commented about this earlier in the season as well. Holtby has had a bit of a resurgence with the Dallas Stars. I wouldn't say he's their number one. Jake Ottinger has really kind of jumped up and grabbed that. But I'm not here to talk Stars. Anyway, Holtby has kind of had a bit of a resurgence this season. And I've found myself thinking, boy, would it be great for our buddy Sammy to have a mentor like Braden Holtby, and not in that previous role where Holtby was the starter, Samsonov's the understudy, the backup, whatever you want to say. Have a situation where Samsonov is your guy, but you still have this veteran presence that you can turn to if he starts to struggle, or you can turn to and not worry, and still have this guy that our young prized, goaltender can go to, for advice, for guidance. I mean, Holtby is such a great guy. That's what he does. So you can't tell me for a minute Braden Holtby would not be excited and happy to help shape a young goaltender and to help guide him on his NHL journey. Braden Holtby is such a fantastic guy. I'm done gushing about Holtz. I miss him. I'll say that. I miss Braden Holtby in Washington. But for Samsonov, he's doing fine right now. I wouldn't say he necessarily needs a mentor. I think it would be a luxury more than a need at this point for him. And Vitek, I think these two, being young guys kind of in the same boat, I think, it's natural to kind of lean on each other. And I think they kind of have, maybe a little bit, competition going, but also friendship, guidance, all these things you need to have as number one, number two goaltenders in this league or in any league. So for Sammy, I had my doubts at the start of this season. Last season did not go well. The off-ice issues, I had my doubts. And the Caps, you could tell they had their doubts. The contract came due. What'd they do? They didn't give him 3 years. They didn't even give him 2 years. They gave him 1. And in my mind, and I think a lot of, if you want to look at other opinions, I think a lot of people shared the opinion that this is his chance. This is his last chance, okay? He played as a backup under Braden Holtby. He's had a couple years now where he's been able to kind of split starts. He had 1 year, I apologize, 1 year where he could kind of split starts. And then, okay, this is the 1 year. We're looking for you to jump up and grab the starting job. And we're looking for you to clean up this nonsense off the ice. That's what we need from a starting goalie. And I think it was laid out to him very clearly that, okay, we need you to be the guy we drafted and the guy who was one of the best goalies in Russia at the time. And we need you to stay out of trouble off the ice. And if you can prove to us that you'll do that, we will reward you with the bigger contract. But I can see why this management team did not want to throw, $30 million over 5 years at this guy. Off the ice problems, just not as consistent as you'd like to see. We've seen flashes in the past, in the past year or so of what he could be and what we hope he will be. Very, very good. And now he's becoming that. He has his struggles here and there, but for the most part, Samsonov is, I think, turning into that goalie we all hoped he was going to be when they drafted him. That Nashville game was tough. We're going to move on from that. The Detroit game, lights out. He was all season he's been struggled early, struggled to find his feet, but once he did, he's been the guy. And I think he will continue to be their guy. No disrespect for Vitek Vanacek. I like the guy. I hope he can keep making this a competition, keep pushing Sammy. I think that's what he needs. I think if it's just Sammy by himself and nobody to push him, I don't know if he's this good. But with somebody there to push him, I think this is going to turn Samsonov into a very elite goaltender very quickly. So, for the Caps, finally, I will admit, and I said it a little bit ago, I was not this guy's biggest fan. I was predicting they wouldn't re-up his contract, he'd go back to Russia, or they'd trade him. I did not see him with this team long-term at the start of this season. And now I do very much see him as the guy, the number one goalie in Washington for years to come. Yes, I made a quick transition, and I think everybody did. I don't think any of us really expected him to make this change so quickly. It's almost like he just flipped a switch and just started stacking up wins, started putting together, stronger games, more solid performances. So great for Sammy. I'm very excited. I'm very happy. I have to eat my words that he wouldn't be with the team very long. And I hope it continues. I hope this is the guy that we're looking back at in, 15, 20 years saying, wow, this is the best goaltender in Caps history. So finally, to be done gushing, to be done talking about players individually, Alex Ovechkin, another milestone, Kuznetsov heating back up. I will be back with you 2 more games. New Jersey this afternoon, and excuse me a moment, the Caps will have some time off. Following that, I had Montreal on the brain. They were supposed to be in Montreal on Tuesday. That has been postponed by the NHL. Lack of fan attendance in Montreal. The NHL is not messing with decreased audiences this year. They are postponing games in Canada, and the revenue lost due to lack of fans over the last couple of years. The NHL's done doing it. So we will see that Montreal game made up at a later date. Their next engagement will be on Friday in St. Louis with the Blues. Looking for 2 more wins. This is the first video, I think, in almost a month that I can sit here and tell you the Caps have won back-to-back games. So we're looking for it to continue. We've got, New Jersey, young team, division game. Need to pull out a win here. This should be a winnable game. This should be, not to call New Jersey a pushover or anything like that, because they're not. But the Caps, you've got a lot of your big names back. New Jersey is still a young building team. Make the most of this. Get another win. String a few together in a row. The Blues, going to be a tough game. Still really good talent over there. Still a Stanley Cup expectations in St. Louis. A little bit of a homecoming for TJ Oshie. Finally, we're looking for this to continue. They struggled a little bit against Nashville, but they right the ship and get the win. Really good win in Detroit. They, weathered the storm in the first period, and I think controlled most of the game after that. So we're looking for it to continue. Control, scoring first, good defensive play, good goaltending, hopefully, from Sammy. I'm sure we'll see Vitek sometime this week. It's been a little bit since we've seen him. So looking for the good stuff to continue, looking for more of the same. Until next time, my friends, go Caps.